and it is the Copperleaf Memorandum of Understanding. We're very privileged to have Mr. Gary Nicholson with us tonight from Copperleaf. And just as a little bit of background, what he wants to do is discuss the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of DuPont and Copperleaf pertaining to the development of the back 40, 262 acres of commercial property around the home course. And I think as the council is aware, but some people may not be, an MOU is not required. And we have a recent example when we went through the process to approve the text amendment that allowed the proceeding forward for the potential development of the indoor storage unit and Ace Hardware. There's no MOU with that, and it's not really necessary because that's really a one-time, one building, one thing, very, very narrowly defined. And the way, in my own mind, the way I describe the process is I think of it as a magnifying glass, you know, a sunny day over a piece of wood, and at the very point of where that light is all concentrated, you have a facility that's open and ready for business. And I look at it as a series of lenses moving back towards that magnifying glass, and those are very initial discussions. When Gary came in and met with us and just started having some discussions, that's where that light begins to focus. The MOU is really that next level that will focus it. And at some point in time, you get develop an agreement or agreements. At some point in time, there's actually permits issued. And then you inspect the building and open the key and cut a ribbon, and it's done. So all of these help to focus the project, and it serves dual purposes. It's not a binding agreement, but it provides some level of assurance for the city and for the developer of intent. And we basically made deal points on it. You know, what are those things that are important to us? What are those things that are important to them? Where are those things that we're going to do things for each other? There are not a lot of things a city can do, particularly in the state of Washington. The state withholds to its level the authority to grant and not grant great concessions for development. And so that the city has limited tools at its disposal to encourage development. But as we go through the MOU, that's how we do establish some of those things that we are able and willing to do. Is at the end of the day, good development is good for a city. We're very fortunate in that we have a fair balance, but I think as all of us know that the commercial development in this city essentially came to a screeching halt in about 2007. Something called a recession hit and the train drove right off the tracks. So when we hear the comments, well, this isn't the DuPont I signed up for, actually it was. And we can go back to 1985 and see how zoning was laid out in the city, and there was actually a lot more commercial development that was planned. Everything north of Center Drive was going to be commercial and industrial. We're fortunate that the economy is such that now we're moving on with multiple development projects. And this potential project that Gary's representing is a big deal. This is a major project, and I think it has a lot of potential to do just some great things for the city, bring jobs, bring services we don't have. As an ancillary benefit, it opens up properties that we don't have access to. The 1833 Hudson Bay Company site, the Wilkes Observatory, Old Fort Lake. For the Nisqually tribe, they have over 40 acres of land on the south side of Sequatchie Creek that all of a sudden becomes accessible. And so I think there's a lot of great benefits that can be derived through this. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our guest tonight. Sir.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate this. Appreciate the opportunity to I appreciate the opportunity to present tonight. Before I get into the vision of the property, I think it's important for us to understand there's some really key attributes to this property that, if done right, is going to be make it one of the premier business parks in the United States. So if you take a look at some of the key characteristics of the property, okay, you've got an incredible history on this property. 5,700 years ago, the Sequatchie Indians and the Nisquallies habitated this area. Today, we still have Indian burial sites on our property. If you take a look at what's gone on with the Hudson Bay in the 1830s, and then we got the 1833 site on the property, and it's sitting there, and really no one knows about it. You go out to the Welch Observatory, and again, it's just sort of out there. It's not, commented on, it's not really highlighted, it's just there. Yet, if you take a look at these attributes and you put them into an overall strategy and into a business park, you've got something very special. You've got a 15-acre lake sitting there that no one knows anything about, and it's hard to get to. But if that lake could be created similar to like a green lake, it could be an incredible enhancement to the community and to whoever occupies this park. So you've got a history that's got to be honored, and if it's done right, this makes this property very, very special. Then you've got the aesthetics and you've got the geology. If you take a look at properties around the United States, how many properties are around a championship golf course? You can find a few really communities around a championship golf course, but not a technology or business park. And if you take a look across the country, how many properties have views from out right here? And then if you take a look at it and you're going, Puget Sound, and you've got incredible views of Puget Sound. So you've got history, you've got geology working for you. And all this has to be honored in any type of real estate development. If it's done right, it really starts to make this property very special to the community and to the state. And so my goal tonight is to wrap the history and the beauty of this property into a type of real estate development that is going to be world-class and the best in the United States, if not the world, because of the attributes that the property has. So if you take a look at sort of the MOU, the key thing for me is that I want to make sure that every one of these buildings is architecturally designed world-class. So I don't care if it's a warehouse building, I don't care if it's an office building, I don't care if it's a technology building, I don't care if it's a retail building. It's all got to be first class, and it all has to blend in to the history and to the aesthetics of the site. If not, then we miss the opportunity. If you take a look from a community standpoint, you have the potential of $500 to $1 billion of real estate development, millions and millions of dollars of tax opportunity. DuPont could probably be one of the wealthiest cities in the country, based upon the type of development that's taking place in your community right now. It could be one of the premier cities to live in because you've got virtually zero crime. And if this is done right with the mayor's vision, you want a place to work, live, and play. So in about 30 years from now, you've got Sound Transit bring in and stop so people can go and get on a train and go to and from. Ideally, you'd like to have people work here and not have to get on that train. So again, if we do this right, it's a world-class business park. And every building is architecturally designed and works in a synergy to each one. Be it an industrial building, be it an office building, be it a technology building, be it a data center. It doesn't really matter. It's the architectural quality that's going to make this property stand apart. And it's got to blend in with the history, and make the history unique. You've got to blend in and make it work with the overall geology that's here. So, with that said, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, so you've got the draft MOU, and this is really the point of this meeting. You've had it for a while, and the idea is get into the discussion. It's okay, Jeff, you can flip that part around. Okay, so there we have a good reference to it, so you can see it. All right, so council, I turn it over to you.
You've got a handout in front of you, and that's the old plan. It's just the newer map. That is the map that you're asking for, the way it used to be. That's it right there. That's not his vision. This is the way it used to be. What was the company that did that? I'm sorry.
ESM.
Who? ESM Engineering. I'll start.
In the first bullet point, when we're talking about the vision for the property, I think it's important that we include the switchback trail also. I did see the bluff trail mentioned a little bit later in the document, but that access across just that corner of your property is important for cross connections up to Hoffman Hill, past the Wilkes Observatory, then the switchback trail goes down to Sequatchie Creek.
You've been out, you've seen that, you've been out.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. I mean, this, if we can make the attributes of the park, right, blend in with the overall benefits that are already there, that's the key, because it's all about the customer coming in the community. And if we can do it right, then it's going to be an incredible experience for the people that work here and the people that live here. A little bit further on, Jeff, maybe you can address this. The sentence is 262 acres, subject to the deed restriction that is currently placed on the property. What does that mean?
Well, currently, the property, I think as the council aware, is subject to a consent decree that was issued back in 1991 that limits land use activities on the property. One of the things that we're hoping, and I know we've had some discussion a little bit about, is that actually done some outreach with the Department of Ecology to talk about the consent decree. We're going to take this effort to update our comprehensive plan, which is really an outgrowth of the 2015 comp plan amendment process, where we identified we were going to go through and do a specific sub-area plan in this area. It's appropriate to do some outreach with ecology to talk about the content of the consent decree and the restrictions in place, because unless we can address some of those issues, access to some of our public amenities, such as the parks, we can't develop under the consent decree. We're limited to having certain activities from that property, and those are, limiting opportunities for amenities that we would like to see incorporated into this area. So, as part of the overall update process, we would look at the consent decree to find out what things we can do in order to be able to take these facilities as enhancements, such as Old Fort Lake, that is under open space to the city, make it usable and accessible under the consent decree to make sure that it can be used as park property, so that we can then take advantage of that and providing it to the public, as well as addressing things such as access to the 1833 site and turning it into an amenity that can be used and access, and other parts that are under the jurisdictional boundaries of the consent decree to make sure that we can take advantage of those for the public's benefit.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think one of the things, we have a blessing of timing, because we knew when we did the comp plan update last year, we put a marker on this area and said, we'll come back and do a sub-area plan because it just needs more time than we had. Well, now we have a developer and we're doing this at the same time. We could have done it in a vacuum, and not knowing for sure what somebody wants to do and whether we could come to an agreement on what would be highest and best uses and meet the needs of the city and the developer and just take our best shot at it. But now we have the opportunity to consult with the potential developer so that the needs and wants of the city are met consistent with market opportunities. And so as we tailor this, whatever adjustments we end up making through that entire process, the end product should be something that satisfies both the developer and the city. And that's really a unique situation I think we find ourselves in.
Okay, along those lines on page 5, requirements by Copperleaf to accomplish the vision, the third bullet down, can you expound on to exchange, convey portions of each other properties to allow for development of the historical, etc. Again, this goes back to the overall quality and the historical and the geology that's there. What we want to try to do is bring it alive so that everyone can enjoy and use it. And so this is a way to provide capital to make substantial changes and improvements so that the Wilkes Observatory just isn't just sitting out there, that it's actually got more commentary and a better overall overview and better public access. So the key is to provide approximately $5 million of capital improvements to make these improvements in and throughout the overall park.
So the idea is, Andy, we wouldn't charge him a permit fee to build things for us. We would abate that fee. So if we ask for a trail or a road or a parking lot or or something around the lake, and that comes in the agreement that we do, and we wouldn't turn around and then charge them a fee for the right to spend their money to build us something.
And on the staff side, the whole convey,
Yeah.
thing, Councilman, is pretty fits for us. We still have to negotiate out what this means, because I'm not completely clear that we can legally do this back and forth. The idea, again, this is an intent document. If it, and we always say with the extent of law, yada, 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 covered. We're still working with Minister Dankelson and Cockney to figure out what the best tool is. The idea is you would want, as a business person, to make a substantial improvement on a piece of property and get a tax credit for that. So that's not anything the city has to pay, that's just another tax than anything else. So knowing that business principle, we're trying to figure out the best tool or mechanism to have them improve our property and get some sort of tax break.
I see.
If you follow that.
I get it. I mean, I didn't particularly like the language,
We're not.
because I didn't understand the intent,
Right.
but.
I had the same problem. I didn't understand what that meant. I didn't get it.
Okay. Next bullet down, on that same page. The city and Copperleaf may attempt to have other companies or corporations make donations to the city for the development of these common area improvements.
I think that's just recognizing the fact that we might go after corporations. For instance, if we're in the old Fort Lake area, maybe one wants to donate, I'm making this up, boats for the lake, something like that. Or it doesn't cover grants specifically, but it would be, here's the real one. There's a skate park business that calls me about every 6 months wanting to learn our skate park. So maybe this company is going to bring funds to the area, maybe Copperleaf has a park out there that it's appropriate for a skate park, and maybe this company will come and build something, things like that.
Something I've already been thinking about related to this, because I've already reached out to them for some other pieces, is maybe very possible to get the Hudson Bay Company to make donations for the restoration of the site.
And Councilman Recep, I mean, there are a lot of major corporations, Starbucks is one, where they will give dollars to local communities to improve parks, there'll be ball fields, whatever else. So there's opportunities to reach out to other corporations that do as part of their giving back to local community. They want to help fund amenities in parks.
And it's a good idea to put it in an MOU. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I see, again, this is kind of the foundation of the intent of how we go about looking at how we can make this thing successful. As the mayor has said clearly out front, and I've talked with our city attorney, this is a non-binding agreement. It's really just kind of a statement of intent of how we go into the conversations, the kind of things that we want to look at. But it doesn't bind us to a specific outcome as much as the things that we will discuss in the outcome.
Okay. And that's my concern, is binding citizens to something. For example, the next couple of bullets down, it says any environmental cleanup expenses required by the DOE or other agencies shall be shared jointly and equally by Copperleaf and the city. What's the impact on citizens for that?
And, one of the things that we looked at, when I looked at that language, is that we have access to go after funding through either state or federal funding to do some cleanup on sites that private individuals don't necessarily have. So we can use our position as a local government entity to seek out those funds to help facilitate any cleanup if cleanup may be necessary, whereas a private individual or someone who's developed a property may not have access to those funds. So we can bring things to the table that they can't, and vice versa.
Yeah, I see that throughout the MOU is there may be certain things that can be leveraged. I think on the next page it talks about some of these seat or
The curb funding?
yeah, the curve,
Yeah,
yes,
right.
or, But, okay, so, I mean, my concern is that our citizens on the hook for building roads, is that what you're telling me?
That's not how we read the document. Again, we don't get into the business of doing that on private property. I mean, that's part of the cost, part of the responsibility of development as it's going forward. But again, we can, as an entity, go to the Community Economic Revitalization Board, which is CURB, an entity in the Department of Commerce, They are there to help provide funding to, as a kickoff, to incentivize and help facilitate economic development in the community by putting in infrastructure. We can go and do that. But it takes a partnership because in order, as part of the grant application, we can't just go ask for money just because. It's really predicated on a specific development proposal. It's the money we facilitate because the curve board, when they look at applications, they look at how many jobs we want to create, what kind of public benefits does it create for the jobs, and so that's why it has to be a partnership and going forward in those funding mechanisms.
How do you, so I'm not referring, I'm looking at the map, not necessarily the overlay on here. How do you see the development along the bluffs?
Well, we've had numerous conversations with Aaron and Ted and Jeff. What we see is that ideally, if you take a look, is there a pointer? Do we have a pointer?
Yes. I'm not
Where's the
very
arrow?
So I'm gonna show up here. If we take a look at the Bluff property, it's a very, very special, very unique property. So I'm gonna start on the north section. The conversations we've had, if the sub-area plan, is that ideally we'd like to see some type of boutique hotel, some type of maybe winery, something that would really make this area special and unique to the community and take advantage of the Bluff property. The question is, if you take a look at the hotel marketplace, you've already got, 5 or 6 hotels into the market? And so, is there a market for that? And what we've committed to is that from a sub-area plan, we would go and use best efforts to try to find a hotel or a winery that would come and locate here and take advantage of this opportunity. Highest and the best use of this property, if you take a look at right here and all the residential, is that this would probably would go residential, but you've got a brownfield site that's cleaned up to industrial standards. So can that be cleaned up within a reasonable cost? And is there a market for high-end residential in the city of DuPont? And at what cost? So if you look at this would also be would be like a corporate headquarters type of location that would be ideal. So those are some of the uses that we see as what we would classify in real estate nomenclature, highest and best use. So the Bluff property is very special, very unique. If you move into this property right here, because it butts into the residential, we think this should be equally into residential or type of services to support the community, medical, those type of services. Here in the core, where you don't have your views, this would be more your light manufacturing type of location. And so the key thing, though, is for us is that as you drive in and through the park, what you want is such a high quality CC&Rs. You drive through and you're not going to be able to tell if this is an office building or an industrial building or a warehouse building or a data center or an office building. It all is going to virtually be aesthetically and blending into the overall landscape.
Councilmember Easton, if I can add to that, when we look at this, as I mentioned earlier on, because of the consent decree, the types of activities that we've talked about along the bluff, or Mr. Nicholson has talked about along the bluff, are not currently permitted activities. So, looking at that, we're trying to find ways as we're doing our update to our comprehensive plan to see what we can do to take the bones of the plan that we have in place and create additional opportunities by working through ecology and see if there are that opportunities. And if so, then we have a greater variety of opportunities and things that we can do there that maybe have a greater public benefit, not only along the bluff or in this transition area adjacent to the residential areas. But in order to do that, again, this is kind of the perfect storm in a planning sort of way. We have an effort that the council has already initiated to undertake an update to our comprehensive plan to really focus on a good sub-area plan. We have the opportunity to speak with the Department of Ecology, and they're receptive to having these conversations to find out what we can do. Doesn't mean anything may change, but the door is open for us to have the dialogue and conversation. We may be able to create some additional benefits in this sub-area plan that we would not have otherwise had the opportunity to undertake. At least, again, by doing this effort now with our sub-area planning, having that conversation, we're able to marry those two efforts. And now we have an individual or a company that wants to come in and take a look at this as a whole. So now we're able to blend a whole lot of energies from the city side, from the applicant side, to take a look at what we can do to expand and enhance upon the plan that we have there to truly create something that's, looking at furthering the city's vision about what we'd all like to see there and make a successful project out there for the applicant, one that the residents be proud of as well.
All right, last page, 6, second bullet down, very end, it says, maintain common area, so you're talking about the can, maintaining these areas, so that, just what we know with the RO. Maintain the common area portions of the park as well as DuPont schools, etc. How does that apply to DuPont schools?
One of the areas that we believe in from an overall community standpoint is supporting the educational system. Having world-class schools supporting a world-class business park is important. So we've had preliminary discussions of when the park is fully built out and there's the maintenance, there would be some type of educational contribution to the schools. Is the thought process.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gorski.
I've sent comments to our staff and city attorney this week, but I'll address some of them, and it goes back to reiterate the point in building the roadway and having the city responsible. I think we need to be very clear on the language on that, because I think a lot of citizens would have a lot of heartburn that we're endeavoring to spend their money to build infrastructure for a private company to come in and to sell it. And so I just want to be very cautious when we start using language like that, because people do pay attention. I always find it very curious when people try to sell back the community to me that I already live in. So I heard Puget Sound, history, Mount Rainier, championship golf course, warehouses, duck, duck, goose. Warehouses are a huge bone of contention. They're kind of slipped in here as the word distribution, but we're talking warehouses more or less. I mean, distribution, logistics, whatever you want to put it at, that means buildings that house goods that are transported on trucks or rail and sent to people to buy elsewhere. And so I understand that that is something we already have here, but I see language in this that kind of, and just again, walking off the ledge, it kind of weasels warehouses into this under the guise of distribution. And then we have kind of statements saying, well, after 2 years, Copperleaf may seek to allow developments in accordance with any permissible zone use. So is it zoned for that or not? And I'll let you answer that and I'll continue on.
Councilmember Gorsuch, presently, the Business Technology Park does not allow what is called warehouse distribution. I mean, it's expressly an exception in terms of permitted uses, so it's not a permissible activity presently. I think and I don't think there's any specific plan to work on trying to modify that language. We're looking at how we clean up some of that language. There's always going to be some degree of warehousing or distribution associated with manufacturing, but as I read the plan presently, it does not allow for it to be an independent, freestanding activity to occur within the BT, Business Technology Park zone, or in our Old Fort Lake neighborhood plan. Those are things that everybody has a willingness or opportunity to bring questions up to the planning board and the planning commission to consider in terms of how we look at the plan. Those things will come forward as a recommendation from the planning commission to the council. The council gets to decide whether or not to change or modify any of the uses in there. There's nothing that's starting out that way. As we read the language as it relates to any of the, if after a number of years they are unable to develop it, let's say as the hospitality or the residential, some other type of activity, they can do any use. It's only those uses permitted within the Business Technology Park zone that they would be able to allow to pursue, not a full gamut of anything outside of those parameters. Only those things that are specifically permitted as uses within the Business Technology Park.
Okay, then I'm confused on why we're including the language then of distribution if it's not a permitted use.
Well,
Is it a subset of something else? And
no, it's an intent document. our company here is being very clear with their intent. At some point in the sub-area planning process, they intend to bring it up for the community to consider this.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that you take a look at warehouse and distribution into the overall marketplace, and it seems like different communities have different reactions. What's interesting is you go up into Canyon Park and you go into the Business Technology Park, they've got a blend of everything, and it's an incredibly well-designed, architecturally appealing. So from that standpoint, there's a perfect example where you can drive into a park. It could be a warehouse distribution on your right, it could be an office building on your right and left, and you can't tell the difference. So it's a really, what is market-based and what will drive into the marketplace is what has to be developed. And the key is what you want to try to do from a real estate development standpoint is always take a look at the property. And what is the best use for that property? I mean, it would be a shame to put a warehouse distribution out on the bluff. That would be a corporate headquarters type of location. So you wouldn't want to go down and dummy down the property and put some type of other use. Okay. Now, if you're sitting there for 5 years and there's no revenue, and the only thing that's in the marketplace is warehouse distribution, okay, then you would need to consider that, because if not, the property's just sitting there. It's sort of like if you walk into a building in downtown Seattle or into a marketplace where they demand that you have to have retail storefronts, but there's no retail demand. You've got graffiti, you've got all kinds of things going on under the property because they've zoned it to just have a certain type of use. So the key thing is, from an overall economic development, from a tax standpoint, for the good of the community, you want the property to be fully utilized.
Well, I would disagree with you on that, but that's not what we're here for. What I'm more concerned about is if we start bringing up that air of desperation. If I don't develop this in 5 years, then suddenly a warehouse is looking good for the bluff. I think people would puke all over this in this city. And I'm going to give you the lay of the land of what we hear every day that's not maybe privy to you. So what happens is, yes, a warehouse is something that we could consider, but there's some nuanced language here, and this is where I'm concerned. Because FedEx doesn't necessarily have a warehouse, they have a distribution center where things come in and go out right away, but that still has a feeder of trucks in and out. So it isn't a warehouse by words or by some legal definition. It might be classified something else. But we want open kimono, we want full understanding of what may actually go in there. And so what we just said is that there's a possibility, although it's not desirable, and we would hope to get a corporate partner or a winery, but in the event if it doesn't develop over time, we may have a warehouse there. And that's what people are going to hear, and that's what I am actually hearing. So I have a big problem with that, because when I see, like on page 4, it's going to end up being the second sub-bullet that's listed, but it's, I think, the 6th bullet. A combination of any of the above development types. So that could be 99% warehouses and 1% something really nice to look at. Or we could say, well, they're going to be the nicest looking warehouses in the whole Pierce County. So when I go down and say to Frederickson, for example, yes, they have a very well laid out technology park area. There's warehouses and light industrial, and there's no good feeder road to that. There's Canyon Road. And if you come on 512 about 5 p.m. in the evening, good luck, because people are on the shoulder to get off of the freeway, and they're blocking up the traffic, and it's a perpetual slowdown now. So there's those considerations as well. And we won't have a graffiti problem with the brush, shrub, and scotch broom that there currently if we don't build on it. So I understand that the utilization of this land is important. I understand that we have to address the needs of the real estate developer and that community. But I also think we have to be fully wide open on some of the things that we may be signing up for. And so I'll carry on to the next points. And I'm looking at the partnerships and the things that we could bring to the table. And, and I'll trust that our staff has done the assessment that we'll have the bandwidth and manpower to support some of these things in the course of their everyday business. And so that the other people who need permits pulled and come to the city won't have to wait in, a queue behind the seeking of curb and other such kind of grants and other things. And then the other thing that bothers me on page 5, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think it's the 8th or 9th bullet. City is going to possibly any environmental cleanup expenses, DOE or other agencies, that's a super fun site. And I don't want to sign up my constituency for the possibility of, oh, by the way, we just discovered there's a whole vein of heavy metals in the soil that we're going to disturb, and we're going to have to pay some of that. So let's be clear in the language. If we're going to have to bear any of these costs, I know it's an MOU, but what happens to that land if we do have that development pressure and we have to fork over some tax dollars to that? It's going to be a very hard sell to the community. So I see a lot of language in here that I'm very uncomfortable with. I've sent that to you, Mr. Wilson, so you have a copy of my concerns on that. And the last one, and I'm going to be emphatic about this too, because I do know a little something on this. Copperleaf will lend its support to the city in its efforts to secure a pilot program for the state of Washington for the production of movies in the city of DuPont and other Pierce County cities. The support will be in the form of lending its name, attending meetings at the Washington State Legislature. So this whole unicorn of movies coming to a town, it's basically welfare for multi-billion-dollar corporations that produce movies. And this is what the movie industry does. They go where the dollar is the least. And so if you have a tax plan that's going to allow people to go to another location, so if this involves any calorie burning on the city staff's part, there is no way that I can endorse that statement. So these are kind of things that will need further explanation before I could ever sign on with supporting the MOU as written. But I am really concerned about, now we're talking about hotels and other usage that we may not be able to pull off. And we're saying, wouldn't it be great if we had really expensive houses out there that would be pulling in all this tax revenue, or maybe a winery, or maybe some other thing, but we don't know if the Department of Ecology would permit that use yet. And if it doesn't, then our plan B goes back to light industrial and warehouses. And I want the citizens to know that. That's plan B, because we don't have any concrete proof that plan A is even feasible or legal at this point.
So Councilman Gorski, I know you're passionate about this, but I have to say this over and over and over again. Warehouses are not permitted. You cannot go out there and build warehouses. I just need to be clear about that, because that starts a Facebook frenzy when people hear that. This is intent. Just like the hotel, the houses, none of those are allowable uses right now.
Let's start the language from you.
Well, no, because it's an intent, council member. You know, he's telling us what he'd like to do as a community. Whether it comes to pass or not is up to the community, to the planning commission, and then to you. There is zoning out there today. You know, we have zoning. He can go out and build tomorrow. He doesn't need to build stuff the community wants. And you're looking at the picture right there. But I just want to stress, can't build warehouses, even if he wants to, can't do it. That takes the sub-area planning process. I just need to make that point.
And I think, Councilmember Gorski, I mean, that's what the planning process is that you take a look at, especially when you're updating the sub-area plan, you take a look at what is appropriate, what direction does the city want to go, what can we achieve, what can we do. We will ask the question, can we change uses out there? We're looking and working with the Department of Ecology to find out we will have an answer to that. If there's an answer to it and allows us to do that and incorporate it into the plan, again, that's what gets brought forward as part of the public hearing process of the Planning Commission as well as to the Council for final action. I as staffers, Mr. Dankelson as a proponent of this, we don't get to make the decision about what is done, but they can bring these things up for discussion to find out what can and can't happen within the plan.
And I'm in favor of that, but I want to ask you as staff, what part of no warehouses, from what the public is continuously telling us, don't we understand from the city's perspective and not the developer's perspective? Because I think we've heard it loud and clear after what happened with our current development of warehouses and the reaction of the citizens from that development that was permissible. And there's no denying that that was permissible use there. But now when we start throwing language in there very casually, they go, well, this is what planning's about. We're just going to go look at it again. Now, I mean, the answer is clear. I mean, the answer has been clear for several years and several councils and several mayors that this is something that the citizens, they didn't have the vision painted out for them on what that warehouse and the impact would be. And I think that when it gets casually thrown in there as distribution, and not explicitly, although it was, to the credit, it was mentioned as a warehouse today. This is something that we have to be very, very vigorous in defending. That point of view is what we are here to defend. That is why we're elected to defend that point of view. And the point of view has been very clear for the last 3 years since I've sat on council that the current warehouses that were permitted, that were permissible, that is what the citizens have heartburn over. So we have to tread very lightly on any path going forward that we are now addressing their wants and needs and that and proving to everybody that we did listen to them for the past 3 years. So I understand, yes, it would be great if we had houses, if we had a hotel, if we had a corporate center. I would love that. I would absolutely love that. I would like to be a partner in that. But let's start being realistic from the staff's perspective of what is being said to us, and if it's not permissible now and you have to reiterate that, don't reiterate me, I know what it says. But the citizens are the ones who are going to be asking the question, what is distribution? Why is it in the MOU? What does it mean? Can we build that? Will this eventually happen? And then the capitulation of the city at some point when they feel the pressure economically, will they cave in? And that's what everyone in the audience is thinking right now.
And I just have to say, I know it's high humor and high support for the people behind me. This is an intent document from the developer. The staff did not write this. The staff is not out there saying, hey, we should have warehouses. Not fair.
Go ahead.
I won't rehash anything that's already been brought up. I have a couple of questions. Under requirements by the city to accomplish the vision on bullet point number 5, regarding the property tax abatement, we're talking about 262 acres, so 20% would be a little over 50 acres sold or whichever to, before you start collecting the property tax. Do we have a dollar figure assigned to how much that would be giving up to the city at all?
John, I believe the property taxes are right now about $250,000 to $300,000. The intent,
The whole acreage?
I think so, yeah. And the intent there is that my partner is in agreement in alignment, and so we don't believe it's fair for us to be paying taxes, and yet at the same time the city can do what it wants and hold us hostage where we can't do any type of development, yet we're stuck paying property taxes. So we believe it's a type of alignment that works well. We've used it in other business opportunities that we've done. And then creating that alignment means that we work together to solve it instead of one taking advantage of the other. So that's the intent.
I've seen this before when I did some commercial loans. So I'm curious, is this typical for developers that cities would have that tax abatement? I've seen it.
Larger type developments. I mean, you look at, and I know probably Matt has a lot of experience because he sees this down at the state all the time. If you look at what the state has done for companies like Boeing, they've done huge things. There's not a lot of things that we have in our tool bag, and this is one. And it's not a blanket. Again, it's tied to that 20%. It gives us an incentive to see the development move forward.
Is there any way to suggest a time frame in there as well, or is that out of the question for the 20%?
Again, what we want to try to do is, from a real estate development standpoint, timing is really important. So the longer it takes to get a permit, the longer it takes to get the sub-area plan, all those type of things just virtually eat into your cost of carry. And so it becomes, at some point, it becomes not profitable. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is that when a project becomes unprofitable, then everyone suffers. The community suffers, the developer suffers. So what we're trying to do is just create a win-win and have that as a sort of an incentive that we're all going to work together. We all want to make sure that property taxes are paid. It's important that those property taxes get paid sooner than later. So.
And I think, Councilmember Gassick, is that, as I understand it, we don't have the unilateral authority to do any tax abatement. So the intent of this bullet point is to see if the legislature would grant anything. So there's no guarantee regarding anything. It never hurts to ask the question if that may help facilitate a positive outcome. But it's not something that we can do in and of ourselves, other than ask the question.
It would just be in cooperation with.
Correct.
And I've already began that dialogue with the county and the state. And our representatives are open to the discussion.
Okay. Thank you. On bullet point 6, the last sentence, they will work with Nisqually tribe to gain access through the treaty area and potential relocation of burial sites. Have we already included Nisqually as part of these
Yeah,
conversations?
they have been in right at the table right at the beginning.
Okay, and so this is not an issue for them?
And
That's
just like it takes the city council to approve things, the tribal council would have to approve, but we've had representatives of the tribal council at the table, at some actual work taking place out on the site, and we're pretty confident that they actually are very favorable of this, because there are sites out there that they would like to have addressed differently than they currently are, and this would give them a vehicle to do that.
Okay.
Shauna, one of the things that we did is that, again, honoring the Nisquallies is changing the name of the business park that would include the Nisqually name somehow, some way, and also the roads and the roads in the park would be named after their chiefs. So what we're trying to do is, again, align the history of the park and the community and bring it into one so that it works and flows, and it's more than just a business park. It's really a place to live and play. So.
We're setting up to do a series of presentations to the Nisqually tribe. I'm gonna do one, Gary's gonna do one. And ours, besides whether you know about this and it's going on, and not directly tied to development, but there's 40 acres of land along the south side of the Sequalichi that this will gain access to. And the Nisquallies are excited about this because they own land and they can't get to it right now. And they're discussing the possibility of potentially a joint museum interpretive center out there with us that would give us an opportunity to expand more. They've looked at, if you're familiar with Lake Island, the activity that takes place out there, that's an opportunity for them to do that. And so there's some real opportunities for cultural enhancement. If you tie to it the Wilkes Observatory in the 1833 site, and you look at what the tribe can do on their land, that now you gain access to. Also, there's some really neat things that could happen out there.
Thanks, that's all I have.
Councilmember Coffey.
Hi. What is your history with this property?
My history goes back to when I was the regional director for First Industrial. We looked at this and we purchased the property using the Cal Stores land fund. It was an 8-year land fund, and so that's the history.
So what year was that?
That was in the 2007-2008 timeframe.
Okay. You know, I guess I have to hand it to you because you pretty much asked for everything, and I believe that the city is put up carrying the majority of the weight up front on the whole deal. And some of those, you know, some of those things like that have already been mentioned, but the time frame as far as the sub-area planning, I feel is too short. I talked with Ted today. He felt that by the end of December, you know, that should be able to be worked out. I have grave concerns about the building permit abatement. You know, you talk about the historical sites and the artifacts, and this would increase its development costs. So, you know, you want something back through this whole thing at the cost to the city, is the way I see it. In order to do things that business has to take a risk on, just to do business. I worked in the private sector all my life, so there's always risks in business. Like what's been mentioned, I don't like the idea of the 20% hold on the property tax. The city went through, and I'm sure you are aware of it, the city went through the recession, and we're really becoming we're becoming stabilized now to where I don't feel that the city should be put in the position to carry a lot of this financial burden. And when you ask for these bonds and whatnot, we have to apply for those bonds. The city has to apply for those bonds. So is that?
Let me clarify that. Those bonds have already been applied for by Pierce County through Weyerhaeuser. So those bonds are actually in motion, is our understanding, working with Pierce County. The industrial revenue bonds.
Okay, so you don't need the full faith and credit of the city to back those bonds?
I believe that's coming from Pierce County, is my understanding. They control the revenue bonds, and so that's a Pierce County situation. And they volunteered that. That's part of their overall economic development. A lot of these things, a lot of these concepts have been discussed with Pierce County. And so some of these concepts that we're asking for are virtually more or less in line with any type of developer. So we're not trying to become special or anything like that. These are things that, as you sit down with the Pierce County Economic Development Council, they sort of give you guidelines on some things that are there. So, like the curb money, that's coming from the state, and that's an application you make. So.
Okay, and then, but all of these things would be handled by Pierce County. Our staff would not be involved in that.
On the curb money, I believe that the city would be making that application. The industrial revenue bonds would be coming from Pierce County.
Okay. And once again, you don't need the full faith and credit of the city in order to do curb or those other grants.
No, I believe those are funds that are coming directly from the state, and those are made available, and virtually every community has access to that. They just have to make application. So we're not trying to do anything different than any other developer would be with working with any other community.
Okay, but I have to agree with Councilmember Gorski that, the city cannot, hire another person to take care of this project without, there's got to be, there's reimbursable expenses, that has to be taken care of. We can't take that out of our general fund just to hire another person to run this. But back to this Model Toxic Control Act. Now, I believe that was already used when the original cleanup was done out here. So, I don't know if that would even be available.
Yeah, I think where that came from is if the city wants to move into more of a residential development, we're not advocating for residential development. You asked me what the highest and best use would be, like out on the bluff, and you take a look at the southern portion, it's obvious that would be residential. But we're not looking to go do residential per se. We're not advocating that today. End of the day, if we have to take that industrial cleanup standard to a residential cleanup standard, and that's something the city would like to do, then we're thinking that would be more of the responsibility of the city if they really want that to be residential, is the thought process behind that.
Personally, I would love to see that in residential, in small mixed use of retail or whatever, because that was the vision before Weyerhaeuser slapped the deed restriction on it. The residential was to be around the golf course, not out in the Sequalachu Village pit. They were switched back in the early 2000s.
Penny, we can support that. I mean, we're not opposed to the residential. The only thing that's restricting us from a residential right now is the deed restriction in the brownfield.
It's as well as I do how beautiful that property is and the potential. And yeah, that would be wonderful if you had corporate headquarters out there. But you know what? Right down the street, we have an Intel campus that the new owner, evidently, we couldn't make an Intel campus work in DuPont, so they're gonna implode those buildings. They're gonna get rid of those beautiful Intel high-tech buildings, and they're gonna put in a warehouse. You know, that's, you know, it goes along with what Mike said. And we've had unintended consequences with the Amazon warehouse across the street from Edmonds Village.
Yeah.
And I don't really even know if there's a successful business and technology park around the golf course. I mean, you know, I don't know. Can you direct me to one that's? I would hate for.
Willow's Run.
Where?
Willow's Run.
Willow's Run.
There's parks that, again, most well-designed business parks have tight CC&Rs, so that the look and feel of the park is special. And that's the key thing for here, but you've got even more incredible attributes on this property. You've got the historical significance, it has to be drawn out. So, end of the day, from a commercial real estate standpoint, we're in a state of flux. I mean, when Tesla becomes more, you know, worth more than Ford or GM, and yet it has no earnings, the technology is starting to change. When Intel has to vacate and you implode buildings, and there's no office demand for, you know, suburban office, it just, you know, where Weyerhaeuser just vacated their corporate headquarters and moved to Pioneer Square. If you'd have told me 20 years ago that would ever happen. So it's a really interesting dynamic that we're caught in from an overall community and real estate standpoint, because everything seems, the rules of engagement seems to be changing. And I agree with you, those are beautiful buildings. It just makes my stomach turn to think those would be torn down. So.
Right, and so it goes back to the point that is the biggest concern of this community. You've laid out a beautiful vision of what this property could be, but if you don't have the market to fulfill those high-end corporate offices out on the bluff, you know, and you said that you can't sit on this property, you know, because that's what CalTERS has been doing. So, you know, I don't want to hear that, well, sorry, that dream didn't work out, so here's what you get.
Yeah, I mean, from my vantage point, it's our dream. Because if you've got a situation where you go and you believe that it's a hotel or an office building and that's the highest use, but there's no market for it, does the property just sit fallow and just sit there for another 10, 20 years until the council changes or the vision changes or the market comes back? I mean, those are the things, the reality of the situation that there's no answers for. If I had the crystal ball, that would be great, but end of the day, the market is going to dictate what is going to be used from an overall community standpoint, and those uses and demands are going to be flowing into the marketplace based upon the location of where DuPont sits on the, you know, in the overall Puget Sound area. So it's hard to say where that market will be 5 years from now. That's a $64 question. I would like to say that, you know, the goal is to try to get to the best use for that property. If it's residential, we try to get to residential. But what happens if there's a change in the market and residential and high-end decides to change until that residential market goes? Similar to what happened in 2008, 2009, where residential market, you know, got slashed by 50%. So it's a dilemma that we're all faced with, be it a developer, be it a community, be it a council. So.
Councilmember Coffey, I mean, one of the biggest challenges for us in this process is that we're obligated to still meet the Growth Management Act. That means we have obligations about what we can and what we can't do. We have made commitments in terms of our population and employment forecast, which means how much commercial industrial lands they have available in the city, how much residential lands we have in the city, and those are all part of a larger allocation in terms of meeting the regional needs. So fundamental changes we're making in a wholesale shift may put us at odds with some of the with compliance under the Growth Management Act. So what we're looking at do is how we fine tune our comp plan here to create some opportunities that may not presently exist, still keep us within the spirit and intent of the Growth Management Act so that we're consistent with the requirements that are incumbent upon the city to meet. We can't, we have to write a plan that's specific enough that they can look at and say that it is consistent, that it is compliant, that we're not doing a fundamental change, but we're also trying to create some opportunity, some flexibility in there. But again, the plan is everything. The plan sets the tone of how this property will be developed, not only tomorrow, but in the next 7 or 8 years, because we can really only do major updates every 8 years, and we don't want to go through and update our plan every year. It's a costly, cumbersome process. But we use the plan to set the foundation about what we want to look this, what we want this area to look like, how we're going to get there. We use that as the roadmap then to create the development regulations to meet the expectations of the community of what this area will look like, to fit in with what the goals, desires, and wants and needs of the community are for the vision for here. It's a collective package. It's all of these elements have to go in together. No matter what the uses are, if we want to protect certain areas in there, whether it's our cultural resources area in there, we write that into the plan to provide the protections, to provide the access to those areas. We write our development regulations in such a way to protect those areas, to create the things, opportunities we want to create in that area. It's not just a blank slate where anybody gets to pick and choose what they want to do out there without any without guidance or regulation to control how it goes.
I understand that, it's pretty much been set, but I can't believe that with the amount of growth, the mayor, myself, did you go, Eric? Anyway, we went to the annual meeting for the Tacoma Pierce County Economic Development Board. And the growth in Pierce County is phenomenal. I mean, it's going crazy. So I can't believe that there couldn't be some discussion with PSRC or whoever, if the opportunity came for us to, take more population. At one time, they wanted us to build 6-story buildings downtown to accommodate a transit-oriented village. So things can be changed. I don't know. I'm just I want things to. This is the as Mike has said, this is our last big shot at development, and I don't want it to be something that everybody that lives around there is going to hate. And I want it to be an asset to this community. So, I don't know,
We've had this discussion on doing all residential out there, but I'd remind the council that, first of all, if we have that discussion, then you better bring the school board to the table right off the bat. How many more schools are you ready to build? How much larger are we making fire and police? And the simple matter is, communities that have a good balance of residential, commercial, retail, thrive. We are fortunate that because of our current balance and because of some of these big ticket companies, the Amazon building produces a significant portion of the revenues in this city. And there's some aggravation with it. And we're working on some stuff that we'll have another discussion about later to mitigate some of that. But houses are consumers of municipal resources more than they are contributors. And so without a balance, you end up with extremely high property tax rates. That's what happens to cities. And in our neighboring city, Stilicho made a decision. They made a conscious decision to not have commercial activity. And that's why their city property tax approaches 3 times what ours is. Because they've got to make up for the fact that they don't have commercial development. My hope is that what we do is we create a balance within the city that provides employment, provides services. We all know that we have no retail here, none to speak of. Retail and property tax ought to be competing for the #1 contributor to municipal revenues. Our retail sales tax is a distant fourth. And that's, how we got to that, that's a long story. But as we do commercial developments, I believe if we do them right, we better balance the city's revenue stream. We don't overload the services that we already have. We don't impose burdens on the school district. You know, there's second and third order effects of all that. When, you know, Jeff talks about the Growth Management Act, it's tied to a lot of different things. Quite honestly, I think we're in a unique position to be the un-Seattle of the area. I don't think our goal is to be the low-income housing for King County. And a lot of places in Pierce and Snohomish County are doing that. That's what they are. And all our people will get in the bus and the train 20, 30 years from now and ride off to Seattle to go to work. We have the opportunity to do that thing that everybody talks about and be the place where people live and work and play. And it happens here. And that's kind of special.
If I could add, Mr. Mayor, I think, you know, one of the comments in Councilmember Coffey is that, again, the consent decree right now dictates a lot of what can and can't happen on the property. And so as we go through that and as we continue those conversations, my hope is that they will give us some degree of flexibility. Having spent some time on the side of the counter developing property, there's also costs associated with how much. If they say you need to clean up to a higher standard, any person buying that piece of property is going to look at the return on investment about what they can do, how much it costs them to clean up that property, and whether or not it actually makes sense to spend that dollars to get those residential units out there. So we're looking to try and strike some balance if that opportunity exists. We don't even know if that exists right now, but we want to pursue that conversation. But I don't think it's something that, you know, in my professional opinion and in my conversation, I don't see that we're going to get to the point where they're going to blanket say that you can do residential over the entire area. And I don't think it'd be practical or feasible in order to be able to do that, given the costs associated with what might be necessary to remediate that property to that particular level. There might be pockets in there where we can do it to the benefit of the community to provide that transition between the existing residential as it moves in towards the business part component of it. But, you know, we want to selectively look at how we can do that and how we can work with ecology and create the right kind of opportunity to strike a balance. But I don't think that we're going to get a blanket approval to do it anywhere and to the entire area. I think it'll be limited at best. And that's my opinion based on my conversations up front at, you know, the early stages.
I like some of the ideas that have been brought forth on some of the vision of what you'd like to do there. My concerns really exist around the timeline initially to have this done, and the $50,000 to expedite the process in the city reimbursing if it doesn't happen, because, you know, I spent a few years on the planning commission, so I know that if we do this right, that it may not happen within that time frame, and I would like to see it done right. My major concern is with the infrastructure that's been talked about with the roads, and as the mayor brought up with some of the other things, if we do housing and so forth, there's other things that go along with that for public safety and fire and all that other kind of stuff, ALS we're talking about now, especially if we add more resident. So I just want to be clear that for me, the traffic additions, you know, we talked about having that traffic study thing to where we can plug and play these things that, depending on how these things are developed, what that's going to look like to the city, where the traffic's going to go, because we have serious traffic situation right now with the train and everything else, and exit 119 and no truck traffic down 118 for down Center Drive. So that's my major concern, is that whatever happens, that the infrastructure is built before and sufficient enough to support whatever it is that we want to go through. As far as the Growth Management Act, you know, I hate that. I don't want anybody telling us in DuPont what we need to do to have a certain population level. We, like Councilmember Gorski said, there's been people that have been here longer than I have and have a vision for what the city was supposed to look like, and we still have a lot of those people here, and of course things have changed over the years, but I think that we need to do what is right for what we want here in DuPont, not what somebody else is telling us what we need to look like. But at the same time, I also understand that as a property owner, that you have, you know, there's certain regulations that allow you to do certain things. We shouldn't be sitting here telling you what you can't do with your property when it comes time to doing it in accordance with whatever ordinances and so forth that we have. So we need to be able to support the commercial development, but at the same time, keeping in mind what we want to see within DuPont, within, you know, with what we have to be able to control it. I mean, you know, we can't tell you what you can't do with your property necessarily, but I like the fact, like I started out with, that some of these things you talked about doing around the lake, like Green Lake and some of the other things, I think those would be great. You know, I would love to be able to see those kind of things.
Well, those are the type of attributes, if you develop, that you have a shot for the office headquarters. You have a shot for the hotel. If you don't do those things, okay, then those attributes or those assets are wasted. And so to me, that gives us the best, that really creates the buzz around the property. It really gives us a chance to create the world-class business park and have companies like corporate headquarters locate here, like a boutique Westin hotel come in and plop down in the north end, and maybe some type of high-end San Michelle winery that comes in, and maybe this becomes sort of the wine country of the south part of the overall Puget Sound area. So there's all kinds of opportunities, but those attributes, the historical attributes and the physical attributes have to come alive. I mean, if you take a look at the road system that's put through the park, you've got sidewalks, you've got bike paths. So it's already made for pedestrian-friendly use. And so what you've got to try to do is wrap the high-quality architecture so that you don't get wrapped around if it's a data center, a warehouse, an office building, a retail building. What you want is the high-end look. So when people drive by, they're not going, oh, there's a really ugly data center, or that's a really ugly office building. I wish they would have redesigned it differently. Or that's a warehouse, and I hate warehouses. What you want is you want people to drive through the park and go, wow, that's really impressive. That looks great. And they're not trying to pick out what kind of use it is.
Well, and I agree with the same thing with this indoor storage that we have going up with the, hopefully with the Ace Harbor below. You know, they have renderings of what the buildings are going to look like, which they look great. But, you know, the majority of the people in DuPont, to be honest with you, don't care about what it looks like. They care about what's in it. And they would rather see, you know, restaurants and certain things that, you know, movie theaters or whatever that they would like to come to. You know, things that may not be supportive in a business aspect or a revenue aspect for a property owner. So I don't think we're ever going to please what the majority of citizens in DuPont would like to see, because it's just not zoned that way. It's just not probably profitable, marketable that way, but that's just the nature of the beast.
Councilmember Hilder.
Thanks. So I actually first want to say thanks for bringing this forward and letting us pick it apart. And we are certainly excited about the Plan A vision. It's the Plan B vision that I think you're hearing us echo a lot of concerns about. And I won't belabor the point of some of our concerns about the Plan B, but I echo Councilmember Gassick's concerns about bringing the tribe into the picture. Councilmember Coffey's concerns about that Plan B, and certainly share Councilmember Corp's disdain for the GMA. I actually have a question for probably our staff. I read requirements by the city to accomplish the vision, and I see a lot of intergovernmental work, so county, legislature, repeated throughout. Has there been any interface with those levels of government over this
Yes.
just yet? And
Yes.
to what extent are they supportive of what we're trying to do in our vision?
We've already had the county executive out on a full tour of the site. We've also had an extensive discussion with Senator Oban and Representative Murie. So they're aware of the project. They know where it is from a legislative standpoint. We've been given assurances of support at every level. The county is beginning a new economic roundtable that I'll be sitting at. But they're excited about this. I mean, they see this and the other things going on in DuPont as an example of what other places in Pierce County could be doing.
I don't think this does that, but I don't want to you know, when this says requirements, I don't want to put us on the hook for something where we may be depending on the state or the county to accomplish where it's not necessarily on us, but this here says requirements of the city. I just want to make sure we're all cognizant of that, and it's good to hear that they've actually.
You know, I think this requires us to make the effort. I can't guarantee what the county or state are gonna do.
Right, that's what I mean.
I cannot do that. But I can guarantee that I will engage the county executive, the office of the governor, the legislature about what we're trying to do. And it's up to them to decide what they're gonna support or not, but I think what Gary's asking is that we partner with them, do what we can do. Again, there aren't a lot of incentives available at the municipal level other than our good name and our ability to pick up the phone and call people and go meet them.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. From a real estate standpoint, I handled the Boyne account for 10 years and did major site locations for them, also for Washington Mutual. What's really incredible is that you can go around the country and incentives that are, you know, 30, 40, 50, $100 million are offered, and yet, you know, a major development like this would be $500 to $1 billion. Very little incentives. I mean, if you take a look at what's available, maybe from a curb money, maybe it's $2 million or $4 million. So it isn't very much from an overall economic development economic development standpoint when you compare it to what's going on elsewhere across the country.
Just get a little nervous about being required to meet an obligation in an MOU and then be dependent on someone else that isn't necessarily bound by it. That's all I'm saying.
No, I understand. And, yeah, we'll do what we can do. I've been spending a lot of time on this already.
So you were associated with the property, you mentioned a little bit earlier, back to 2007. What was the major move that, if you could share, that brought about the repurchase of property, you know, the sale and purchase of the property, and what do you believe? I mean,
Well, the
why do you
vision,
think it's going to work this time, is what I'm asking.
in 2008, when the bomb went off in the economy, it was really interesting. In 2007, when we made the purchase in December of 2007, and we were quickly moved in to try to get the first portion of the road infrastructure in. And every month that was going by, we virtually had it approved, and then Cal Sturers would come in and say, well, you know, let's wait another week. And it seemed like every month the negativity in the economy and the marketplace continued to impact their decision. And they finally just pulled the funding on the property. I've actually have this property sitting over my desk for the last 6 years. So it's a property that's near and dear to my heart. So if I took a picture right now, you would see virtually that rendering of the property. Actually, it's a better view. It's got more Puget Sound and sort of the Cascades. So it sits there, and it's one of these properties when I've been involved with a couple of other developers and brought them in, and for whatever reasons they couldn't transact with Cal Sturers, and I contacted Cal Sturers asset manager and said, if I could find a capital partner, would you sell it to me? And I found a capital partner that you know, aligned with me, and so we've got the property under contract, and we have to close here in the next few months on the property. And so this MOU and understanding the direction of the council is very important. You know, we're not $1 billion fund like Cal Stores. You know, we're smaller capital, and so we can't afford to you know, buy a piece of property and wait for 5 or 10 years for the market to change or come back. It's a property that we need the council to endorse the vision and move forward with the sub-area plan, and then we make the best efforts of try to create the highest use that we can for each segment of that sub-area plan. That's the best answer for everyone. You know, the last thing I want to do is build a warehouse out on a bluff property, which is a total waste of opportunity. you really want to build a headquarters or something that's going to really take advantage of that view. And that's the highest use that you can do from a real estate standpoint. And that's my commitment. That's what we want to do. We want to put this property, and this is an asset for the community, but it's also an asset for the region and for the state. And because it's got so many wonderful attributes, it makes it more special. It makes it different than a normal, business park. And so what I want to try to do is capture all the wonderfulness of this park and roll it into some, really incredible architectural design so that it's world class and everyone's really proud, and it's achieving $500 to $1 billion of worth from a tax standpoint, so the city of DuPont really benefits overall. I hate to see the light rail come. I like light rail from the standpoint we need the transportation grid, but I hate to see light rail come and virtually then offload everyone out of DuPont and go into other communities. I'd rather have this as a focal point and everyone work, live, and play in their own community. It's more healthy, it's more productive, it reduces the carbon footprint, it's the right answer. So I view this park as the ability to virtually create that for the city of DuPont.
I've heard all your concerns and I understand those. I think what we have to trust is the sub-area development process, and it's not, plan A or plan F. What comes through that process, which ultimately you approve. The council will approve that document at the end of it with the planning commission, with the public involvement is, and really I do believe that Copperleaf needs to help inform us because they have a market sense that we don't have. But there are things that we would accept or not accept in each of these areas, and there are things that the market will support or not support. And what I believe we're looking for is a marriage of those. What are those things that are agreeable to the community? And there's about 6 different discrete areas within the property. So what would work for us there, and what would work for the developer there? Where those intersect, I believe, are those things that are, you want to approve. And so if it's not A, is it 1A? Is it 2A? Let's not put something in there that we absolutely don't want. Let's just not even have that. Not even have it as an option on the menu. Now, Gary, I gotta tell you, I hope you've heard the message from the council. I don't care how pretty you make a warehouse. It can be aesthetically pleasing, but the challenge for our community now is traffic. And a warehouse is still a warehouse, no matter what it looks like. We can make it very attractive, we can berm it, we can have great stuff. But if our main road through here gets crushed, now, we're a ways from that, and council will have some other discussions on some actions we're working. But we're gonna do a traffic study, and we're gonna look at that, but that informs us. So, I trust that you'll make the building as attractive as we want, and it fit in, and, be beautiful. And I also know that, even the word distribution center, we're not talking about, as you use the term, the bombers that we have down there, the 1 million square foot, they wouldn't even fit on any of these lots.
Right. Mayor, let me just comment. From a warehousing standpoint, it's probably unfortunate, but most warehouses aren't 1 million square feet. A normal warehouse, it can be anywhere from 50 to 200,000 square feet, and a lot of times there's manufacturing going on in that warehouse. So what's interesting is that 10 years ago, there wasn't 1 million square feet warehouses. So you've actually put one of the few big box warehouses in your marketplace, which I think has maybe soiled the market, because from a warehouse distribution standpoint, it's a general term that's used in the real estate vernacular. But again, a warehouse distribution building could have manufacturing going on. It could be assemblies. And so if those things are not acceptable, then those are key things that need to be known. What's important, okay, is that there's only like 5 or 6 real estate classifications. You've got your office, you've got your retail, you've got your hotel, you've got your residential, you've got your more or less your technology type of, biotech type of facilities. Then you've got your light manufacturing, which is the warehouse distribution, those type of buildings. Those are your opportunities in the marketplace. And if you shut those markets, those segments down, then virtually you're going to leave the property. If you think that it's just pure office and what's happening from an office standpoint within the Puget Sound region and across the globe, across the United States, everyone's going into urban centers. So there is no office market. So capturing a corporate headquarters, I think there's an opportunity because it's unique and it's on a bluff. But is that demand there? It's weaker than it was 10, 15 years ago. You just look at Weyerhaeuser going and locating in downtown. So those are the market dynamics. And those are the segments of the market that you've got to try to capture. And if you eliminate those, then you've just elevated the chance that you're going to be sitting vacant on the property. And I think that's important for you to understand. If you eliminate the classifications, and let's say you didn't like retail for whatever reasons, you didn't want a big box retail, which is probably the most ugliest of all of the real estate development. Let's say you eliminate that classification, but all of a sudden big box retail becomes very important and it becomes part of the overall real estate in the next few years, which I don't think it will. All of a sudden you've eliminated that opportunity. So those are things that you have to make decisions as a council, and totally respect it and appreciate it. But my concern from an overall real estate development standpoint is that you really want to have a full opportunity at the marketplace, and the market will dictate what's going to work in your community, is my thought.
I don't think you'll find us disagreeing with that, but let me just bring it back to what the workshop, which was the discussion of this MOU. I think I'm still uncomfortable with many of the words that are in here, so far as signing citizens up for what is in here. And I think if whether it's a legally binding agreement or if it's just something that we're putting down, and is it really worth the paper that it's printed on? I think that if we are all in agreement that, yeah, you know, the things that you're talking about, we want to see, but so far as impact to deliverables that the city is signing up for in order to facilitate the development beyond the regular permitting process, and certainly the process that we're going to go through in order to do the sub-area plan, which we already have agreed to do. There are some things in here that have already been mentioned that I am uncomfortable seeing, because I think we're in agreement that, yeah, we want to see your plan A. But so far as signing the city, the staff, the citizens up for any kind of liability insofar as the success or failure of how you're going to sell the property, that's not something that I'm willing to take. I'm willing to support it, you know, from a council perspective and from